I'll never forget the morning I realized the HOA had built 35 homes on my land. Not leased. Not purchased. Not discussed. Built. The air carried the sharp bite of diesel the moment I stepped out of my truck. Mist clung to the tree line, drifting low across the clearing like it was trying to hide what waited behind it. Gravel cracked under my boots as I walked toward the ridge, my ridge, thinking this was just another routine inspection of the irrigation channel I'd designed years earlier. My name is Daniel Carter, civil engineer, 42 years old. I'm calm by nature. I solve problems by following the facts. But nothing prepared me for the sight that emerged through the haze. Fresh lumber. Steel scaffolding. Concrete curing under plastic sheets. And rows of homes, identical, polished, modern, lined across land that legally belonged to me. For a second, I thought I'd stepped into the wrong parcel. Then I saw my old boundary marker, half buried in a pile of mud, snapped clean through like somebody wanted it gone in a hurry. I walked closer. The hum of generators pulsed through the air. A backhoe beeped in slow, deliberate rhythm as it reversed. Workers kept their eyes down, moving fast, avoiding any pause that might give me a chance to talk. "Morning," I said to one of them. He didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on a clipboard and walked the other way. That's when my chest tightened, not from anger, but recognition. I'd seen this choreography before. Years back, during a zoning battle at a dam site. Crews don't avoid eye contact unless they've been told something. I climbed up the nearest dirt berm and looked out over the valley. The subdivision stretched across land that my family had owned for 3 generations. It wasn't just a field. It was our watershed, our grazing space, our buffer against developers who always wanted just a sliver more. Yet here it was, already carved apart. I pulled out my folded plat map. The boundary lines were clear. My parcel ran from the creek bed to the northern ridge. No easements. No transfers. No subdivisions. I'd updated this map myself 6 months earlier for a soil study. But the stakes on the ground told a different story. These lots weren't misplaced by a few feet. They were off by nearly 300 yards. And every error pointed in one direction, toward my side of the line. I took a slow breath. I've learned over the years that silence helps the truth surface. So I just stood there, still as stone, letting the noise of construction wash over me. It gave me time to think. Who approved this? Who signed off? Who thought I wouldn't notice? Footsteps crunched behind me. I turned. Richard Hale, HOA president of the Canyon Ridge community, stood there with his usual smirk. He was dressed like a politician, pressed khakis, spotless boots that had never touched real soil. "Daniel," he said, spreading his arms. "Didn't expect to see you out here so early." I kept my voice even. "What are these homes doing on my property?" He blinked once. Just once. A very calculated pause. "This," he said, sweeping a hand toward the houses. "This is Canyon Ridge, Phase 3. Approved last spring. Fully permitted. Recorded with the county." "No," I said. "Phase 3 stops at the creek. These lots are on my land." Richard tilted his head. "That land was transferred to the HOA years ago." My jaw moved, but no words came out at first. Not because I was surprised, but because I recognized the tactic. He wanted to see if I'd get emotional. Emotional people make mistakes. So I stayed silent and waited. Richard filled the space. "People like him always do." "Maybe you're working off an old survey," he said. "Happens all the time. Boundaries shift. Records update. Nature moves." "That's not how deeds work," I replied. He smiled wider, like my logic amused him. "Well, if you're confused, the county office can clarify," he said. "But I assure you, Daniel, this development is fully compliant." A generator kicked on behind us. The smell of hot exhaust hit my nose. The vibration ran through the dirt under my boots. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Show me the transfer paperwork. His eyes hardened. I don't owe you that. You do if you're building on my property. Richard shoved his hands in his pockets. Talk to the county. I'm busy. He walked off before I could reply. That told me everything I needed to know. I turned back to the ground. The soil was disturbed in long straight lines where someone had ripped out my original markers. I crouched and brushed away loose dirt. The broken pieces of my survey stake lay scattered like bones. They weren't removed by accident. They were cut. A chill ran across my shoulders. Not fear, clarity. I walked the perimeter for the next hour, documenting every inconsistency. I photographed survey flags placed in impossible angles. I measured distances between stakes that contradicted every legal description in the deed. The deeper I went, the more obvious the pattern became. This wasn't sloppy work. It was intentional. At the far edge of the site, near the creek, I found what confirmed it, a laminated plat map pinned to a post. It looked official, but something felt off. The signature block was identical to my county engineer's, but the curve of the last initial was wrong. Forgery. An amateur one at that. My throat tightened. I took a closer photo, zoomed in, and captured the inconsistent pen pressure. Whoever faked it didn't understand how signatures degrade with age. This one looked freshly scanned, printed, and laminated. A gust of wind pushed dust across my boots. It carried the low rumble of trucks leaving the site, signaling lunch break. With fewer eyes on me, I walked the creek bed itself, my creek bed. The water diverted in a new direction, cutting into soft earth where bulldozer tracks crossed straight through it. They hadn't just taken my land. They'd altered my watershed. Something inside me shifted. A quiet, steady resolve replaced every other emotion. I straightened, pulled out my phone, and opened a new folder. I held the camera steady. I filmed the forged map. I filmed the diverted creek. I filmed each house sitting squarely where no house should ever be. Then I turned the camera to the ridgeline and spoke softly, clearly, so there would be no misunderstanding later. They did this deliberately, I said. And they think they're untouchable. The wind carried my words across the clearing. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. That's when I started recording everything. By the next morning, the retaliation had already begun. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just precise enough to make me understand I was being watched. A bright yellow envelope sat on my porch, placed dead center like someone wanted to make sure I saw it before anything else. The paper smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and printer toner. Inside, an HOA violation citing unauthorized storage of industrial equipment. The equipment they were referring to? My toolbox. Inside my own garage. I checked the timestamp printed on the notice. 3:14 a.m. Someone had stood on my porch in the dark, misusing authority to claim I'd broken a rule that didn't even exist. I walked down my driveway, scanning for movement. Nothing. Birds called from the pines. A truck engine hummed in the distance. But the air carried a quiet tension, like the land itself waited for another shoe to drop. I pulled up my security footage. Grainy night vision. A figure in a windbreaker stepped up to my door, placed the envelope, then lifted a phone toward my house, as if photographing a staging area for something bigger. The figure looked around, careful, then hurried off toward the subdivision. I replayed it twice. Same stride. Same build. Richard Hale. The second notice came that afternoon, this time taped to my mailbox with clear packing tape wound around the metal until the door jammed shut. Improper vegetation height. My grass was shorter than the HOA's own requirement. Someone wasn't trying to enforce rules. Someone was trying to break me. I sat on my porch steps, elbows resting on my knees, and watched 3 board members standing near the trail on the edge of my property. They whispered while pretending to check their phones. One pointed at my house. Another laughed under his breath. Their voices floated across the wind. "Guy's losing it," one said. Should have sold when Richard offered, another whispered. I pulled out my phone and hit record without lifting my head. An hour later, I walked down the path toward the creek to check the flow direction again. Halfway there, a construction truck blocked the access point. 2 workers leaned on the hood. "You can't walk through here today," one said. "This is my easement," I replied. "Orders from the board," the other answered. "Safety protocols." They didn't meet my eyes. Workers rarely lie well, they follow instructions to keep their jobs. Someone had told them to block me, and they weren't questioning it. I took a photo of the truck, noted the license plate, then stepped around the rear bumper. "You step past that line and I'll have to report it," the first worker said. "To who?" I asked. "This isn't HOA land." He hesitated long enough to confirm he didn't actually know. I turned back. "Tell Richard the first heard him." Their expressions fell flat. That afternoon, the creek hit me with another blow. The water level had dropped by half. The flow line carved a fresh path toward the new subdivision, clear evidence of a new trench somewhere upstream. The smell of churned clay filled the air. Nearby trees leaned at odd angles, roots exposed. Someone had rerouted the water that fed my property. I followed the line and found fresh tire tracks crossing the bank. Mud splattered upward in arcs that showed a heavy vehicle had cut straight through the creek the night before. My boots sank slightly as I crouched, touching the soil. Still wet. Still settling. This wasn't carelessness. It was a message. By evening, another envelope appeared, this one slipped under my door so quietly I hadn't even heard it land. The notice inside accused me of threatening behavior toward HOA representatives. Underlined twice, final warning. My pulse steadied. Anger burns out fast, precision doesn't. I opened my laptop and cataloged each notice, each timestamp, each lie. The screen glowed in the dim room as I created folders for evidence. Unauthorized equipment. Vegetation height. Threatening behavior. All fabricated. All designed to create a trail they could use later. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed, an unknown number. A voice I recognized immediately spoke fast, low, and cautious. "This is off the record," the caller said. "You don't know me." "All right," I replied. "You didn't hear this from me," the voice continued. Papers shuffled on their end, then a muffled sigh. "There's a plat map on file that shouldn't exist. Date stamps don't line up with the permit log." "Your county staff," I said quietly. Silence. Then, "Just check the year column," the voice whispered. "That's all I'm saying." The call ended. I stared at my phone, replaying the tone of panic threaded through their words. Whoever they were, they had risked a lot to warn me. I grabbed my keys and drove to the county office annex. The night air tasted metallic, like rain was coming, but the sky remained dry. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead. Most of the building was dark, but the public terminals in the lobby stayed operational after hours. Inside, the hum of the fluorescent bulbs echoed through the empty space. I typed my parcel number. The records loaded slowly. Too slowly. The system wasn't old, it had never lagged like this. When the document finally appeared, I leaned forward. There it was. A plat map I had never seen. Signed by someone I'd never met. Stamped with a date that made no sense, 3 years before the supporting permits even existed. My stomach tightened. I swiped to the next page. A deed transfer to HOA ownership. No witness verification. No seal. No payment trail. No tax record. It was like someone created a legal ghost story and hoped nobody would check the lighting. Footsteps suddenly echoed from the hallway. I turned, expecting a guard. Instead, a janitor pushed a mop bucket past the lobby. He nodded once, friendly, oblivious to the storm in my head. I exhaled and returned to the screen. This was the proof I needed. Not enough for court, but enough to show intent. I printed copies of every file, scanned the metadata with my phone, then saved digital duplicates. As I stepped outside, my headlights illuminated a familiar truck parked 2 rows away, the same model that had blocked my creek access earlier. A figure sat inside, barely visible. Watching. I didn't approach. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge them. I got into my truck, locked the doors, and drove home without accelerating too hard. People expecting panic get disappointed by calm. When I reached my driveway, I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The moonlight hit the new pile of envelopes near my door, more false citations. Another round of pressure. I walked inside, set the printed documents on the table, and stared at them spread out under the kitchen light. The fraudulent plat. The phony deed. The missing registry links. Every piece formed a pattern. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coordinated project. At 11:42 p.m., I sent a single email to a land use attorney known for handling impossible cases. I attached 3 documents. No story. No explanation. 5 minutes later, he called. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I need you in my office. Tomorrow morning. Bring everything." His tone wasn't casual. It carried weight. It carried certainty. And for the first time since this started, I felt the shift. The pressure didn't scare me anymore. It clarified the lines. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The next morning, the attorney's office felt colder than the weather outside. The lobby lights hummed with that soft electrical buzz you only hear when your nerves are already stretched. I sat across from a wall lined with framed case victories, reading the sharp, confident headlines beneath each one. When Michael Grant, land use attorney, known for never backing down, opened his door, he didn't waste time with greetings. "Bring the documents," he said. I followed him into a room that smelled faintly of coffee and ink. Maps covered one wall. Binders marked with zoning codes filled the shelves. He closed the door. "Sit," he said. "Now tell me everything in chronological order. Keep it factual." I laid out the forged plat, the inconsistent deed, the timestamps, and the notices. He examined each item with a methodical calm that mirrored my own. His eyes tracked every detail, pen pressure, date fonts, signature angles. "This isn't sloppy fraud," he finally said. "It's structured." "I know," I replied. He tapped the deed with his index finger. "This document is impossible. It references a parcel ID that didn't exist until the county updated its mapping software 5 years later." My pulse steadied. "So it's provably fake?" "Provably," he said, "and traceably." He handed me a legal pad. "Start listing every interaction you've had with Hale. Every word, every threat, every notice, every obstruction. Exact dates." I wrote while he scanned metadata on his laptop. His keyboard clicks filled the room like a metronome. After 20 minutes, he leaned back. "We're going to build this the right way. Quietly. Calmly. And with precision." I nodded. "What's first?" "We shift the power dynamic," he said. "You gather the evidence, I build the structure." For the first time since the mess began, I felt the balance tilt. By noon, I stood with a drone controller in my hands, the morning frost crunching under my boots. The creek shimmered below, reflecting pale winter sunlight. I launched the drone and watched it climb. Its faint hum blended with the rush of water still cutting the wrong path. The camera fed back clear images. Tire tracks across the creek bank. New trenches dug across my easement. Water flowing straight into the subdivision's retention pond. I zoomed in on a flagged stake hammered into the mud. Bright red. Labeled Lot 14. Sitting exactly where my original water channel once ran. I captured every angle. When the drone passed over the ridge, it revealed something worse: cleared ground prepared for another row of homes. And on the dirt lay a blueprint cylinder marked with the HOA's logo. They were expanding. They weren't slowing down. They were accelerating. I landed the drone and saved the footage. That afternoon, I drove to the old dam at the northern edge of my property. The wind funneled through the canyon, carrying a cold metallic taste. The gate hinges creaked when I pushed them open. The reservoir above the dam looked low, exposing dark sediment along the perimeter. I walked the length of the concrete and knelt beside the main valve. Legally, the water rights belonged to me. Legally, the HOA had no authority over the creek. Legally, the flow direction should have never changed. I placed my hand on the metal wheel. It felt cold, steady, patient. They forgot who controls the water, I muttered. Not a threat. Not a plan. Just a fact. I stood, took photos of the water levels, then checked the valve mechanism. It was functional. Untouched. Waiting. When I returned home, 2 unmarked envelopes were taped to my front door. The first accused me of survey equipment violations. The second cited me for unauthorized drone usage. Neither rule existed. Someone had watched me fly the drone. I peeled the envelopes off the door, walked inside, and added them to the expanding folder on my desk. The stack now looked less like harassment and more like a strategy board in a crime series. At 5:03 p.m., Michael called. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. I put him on speaker and spread the documents across my table. "I traced the forged deed," he continued. "The digital original came from an HOA office computer. The metadata shows it was created at 2:11 a.m. on a Sunday." "Who had access?" I asked. "3 people," he replied. "Including Hale." My breath slowed, not from surprise, but confirmation. Michael added, "And Daniel, someone tried to delete the file yesterday." Too late. I already downloaded the full chain. I leaned against the counter. "So what's next?" He paused. "There's more." A contractor reached out. He says he installed boundary stakes based on instructions from Hale and was told to ignore the county plat because the owner won't know. My grip tightened on the phone. "He's willing to testify," Michael said. That was the moment everything sharpened. At sunset, I walked the trail behind my house. The light cut across the ground in long amber streaks. As I reached the ridge overlooking the subdivision, I saw Hale standing by one of the new homes, barking orders at a crew. His posture conveyed arrogance, a man confident he'd never face consequences. I took my time approaching. He noticed me and sighed dramatically. "Daniel," he said, "if this is about the notices." "It's not," I interrupted. He smirked. "Good. Because at this point, your resistance is becoming disruptive." "Disruptive to what?" I asked. "Illegal construction." His jaw tightened. I took a step closer. "I saw the new plat you filed. Interesting signature on that one." His eyes flared for a fraction of a second, small, but undeniable. "You're mistaken," he said. "No," I replied quietly. "You are." A flicker of unease crossed his face. It vanished quickly, replaced by false confidence. "You should choose your battles carefully," he said. "I did," I answered. I turned and walked away, letting him wonder how much I knew. That night, I sat in my workshop with the lights low and the evidence spread across the table. I spoke into my camera, calm, steady, factual. Construction exceeds permitted boundaries by 312 yards. Water diverted at 3 points. Notices fabricated. Deed altered. Plat forged. I paused and looked straight into the lens. They didn't just build on my land. They built on a lie. The doorbell rang. I muted the camera, stood up, and walked to the door. Another envelope. Plain white. No HOA letterhead this time. Inside was a single sentence. "Drop the claims or lose everything." The handwriting was jagged, rushed, like someone angry enough to skip subtlety. I slid the note into a plastic sleeve without touching the ink. Another piece of a puzzle that had grown too big to hide. At 11:21 p.m., Michael texted. Found the last piece. Call me first thing. It's enough to file. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The tone had changed. The leverage had shifted. Everything before this moment was defense. Everything after would be strategy. Tomorrow, the reversal would become official. Tomorrow, we would go public. Tomorrow, the lawsuit would drop like a hammer. And Hale would finally understand the difference between intimidation and evidence. Courtrooms have their own temperature, cooler than necessary, like the air itself is holding its breath. The morning of the hearing, the hallway outside felt thick with anticipation. Lawyers murmured over files, deputies shifted in place, and the faint scent of polished wood filtered through the vents. I took a seat at our table. Michael sat beside me, suit sharp, expression unreadable. Across the aisle, Richard Hale adjusted his tie with the precision of a man who still believed the room belonged to him. The HOA board members clustered behind him like a wall of silent confidence. The judge entered, stern face, decisive steps, no nonsense. She didn't look toward either side. She didn't need to. She already held every document we'd submitted. Case number 22-147, she said. Carter versus Canyon Ridge HOA. My pulse slowed. Not from nerves, focus. Michael stood. Your Honor, we're prepared to present. Hale's attorney rose, voice bright and overly practiced. So are we, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Proceed. Evidence beat 1, maps, metadata, and manipulation. Michael approached the display screen. We will begin with boundary documentation. He tapped the monitor. A drone image of the creek appeared, clear lines, vivid detail, construction footprints crossing into my parcel. This is the plaintiff's original property, he said. Surveyed, recorded, and undisputed for decades. He switched to the forged plat map. And this, he continued, is the document submitted by the HOA to justify construction. The judge leaned forward slightly. Michael zoomed into the signature. Note the pressure inconsistencies, he said. Ink analysis dated this signature at less than 2 years old, while the HOA claims it was signed 7 years ago. Hale shifted in his seat. Michael clicked to the next slide. Metadata timestamps appeared, file creation logs, access history, deletion attempts. This forgery originated from an HOA computer at 2:11 a.m. on a Sunday, he said. 3 individuals had access. One of them is Mr. Hale. The judge looked toward the defense table. Hale's attorney stood. Objection. Circumstantial. Michael didn't blink. Authentication reports confirm the device ID. That's not circumstantial. That's digital forensics. The judge nodded. Overruled. A quiet ripple moved across the gallery. Testimony begins. Michael called our first witness, the contractor who had installed the fraudulent stakes. He walked up in work boots and a clean shirt, hat tucked respectfully in his hands. Michael asked, "State your name and role." "Tom Bradley," he said. "I set boundary markers for Phase 3 construction." "Who directed your placement of the stakes?" "Hale," he answered. "He said the county map was outdated and told me to follow his markers instead." Hale's jaw tightened. "Did he say why?" Michael asked. Tom hesitated. "He said the owner wouldn't know." Gasps scattered through the courtroom. The judge held up a hand for silence. Michael nodded. "Thank you." Hale's attorney stepped forward. "Mr. Bradley, are you certain?" Tom cut him off. "I don't forget conversations when they sound illegal." That landed like a hammer. Evidence beat 2, water rights and engineering reports. Next, Michael brought up the hydrology study. He projected images showing the diverted creek, altered flow, and retention pond. This diversion was not accidental, he said. Here are the trench cut lines leading from the plaintiff's creek to HOA installations. He displayed timestamps, Drone footage, soil moisture readings, water level data recorded over weeks. This is the plaintiff's water, he said. Diverted without notice or permission. The judge scribbled notes with quick, pointed strokes. The county clerk speaks. Our next witness was the anonymous caller, the county clerk. She stepped forward, palms slightly trembling but voice steady. Michael asked, "Did you observe abnormalities in the subdivision paperwork?" "Yes," she said. "The dates on the plat map didn't match our filing system. The parcel ID didn't exist during the claimed year. And the deed transfer lacked proper witnessing." "Did you report this?" "I brought it to my supervisor," she said. "He told me to leave it alone. He said, Canyon Ridge knows what to do." The judge looked up sharply. "Who is your supervisor?" She gave the name. The judge wrote it down with force. Hale stared forward, trying not to show panic. Hale's attorney finally stood. "We request a recess," he said. "Denied," the judge replied. "Continue." Michael walked toward Hale. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you'll take the stand." Hale hesitated, then rose like a man walking into cold water. He sat. The bailiff swore him in. Michael asked one question. "Did you personally authorize construction beyond the legal boundary of Phase 3? Hale swallowed. "I believe the boundaries were correctly determined." "That's not what I asked." Hale shifted, fingers curling on the armrest. "I acted based on the maps provided," he said. Michael brought up the email thread. "You wrote this," he said, reading aloud. "The owner never checks this area. Push the lots through." Hale looked at the email as if seeing it for the first time. "That's taken out of context," he said. Michael slid another document onto the projector, an internal HOA message between Hale and a developer partner. "If we shift the stakes now, we can sell before anyone notices." The room fell silent. Hale's throat tightened. He began. The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Hale, answer clearly." He froze, eyes darting, breath shallow. Michael lowered his voice. "If it was your land, would this be acceptable?" Hale's face drained of color. He didn't answer. The silence was his answer. The judge closed the folder, removed her glasses, and let out a measured breath. "Enough," she said. The room stilled. She spoke with steady gravity. "This court finds that the Canyon Ridge HOA, under the direction of Mr. Hale, engaged in deliberate boundary manipulation, forged documentation, unauthorized water diversion, and retaliatory harassment against the lawful property owner." Her words fell like stones into water. She continued. "All 35 homes must be vacated pending removal or relocation. Full restoration of the plaintiff's land and water channel is required. Damages equivalent to market value, environmental repair, and punitive penalties are awarded to the plaintiff." Her eyes locked on Hale. "And let this stand as reminder. Keep your receipts." They didn't, and it shows. The gavel struck once. Sharp. Final. Justice delivered. Hale slumped in his chair, defeated. The board looked shattered. The gallery whispered in stunned disbelief. Michael turned to me and said quietly, "We won." For the first time in months, my lungs filled without resistance. The reversal wasn't a pivot anymore. It was a victory. A clean, undeniable victory. And the aftermath. That would come next. The first demolition started at dawn. One by one, the unauthorized homes came down, frame by frame, nail by nail. No loud announcements. No grand spectacle. Just machines tearing through drywall that never should have existed, contractors working in silence, and neighbors watching from behind blinds, unsure what to say. I stood at the ridge, overlooking the valley that had once been mine in name alone. Now, it was mine in practice again. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and fresh soil, what it used to smell like, before concrete and politics tried to take over. Below, crews worked methodically. Lot by lot, the stolen structures were cleared. Some homes were relocated. Others, bought out and leveled. Every inch returned under court order. Every dollar clawed back through settlements and restitution. None of it restored what was lost. But it did something more important. It stopped the theft. The HOA collapsed 2 weeks after the verdict. 3 board members resigned. The rest were voted out. The subdivision placed itself into receivership. Volunteers rebuilt the community charter from the ground up, this time with boundaries that respected more than just land. One woman, whose house had sat on my property line, knocked on my door with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know," she said. "If I had, I never would have bought." I nodded. "You're not the one who forged anything." She handed me a pie she'd baked that morning. "I just wanted to say thank you." I took it. We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. That spring, I walked the old trail behind my house and found the creek flowing along its original path. The trench that once diverted the water had collapsed from neglect, and with it, the illusion of control the HOA had tried to claim. I stepped into the cool stream, felt the current push against my boots, and smiled. For the first time in years, the land felt balanced. I kept the dam closed for most of the following month, holding water back to allow the ground to rehydrate. The roots of the pines reached deeper again. The soil darkened. The deer returned. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, I walked to the control valve, placed my hand on the wheel, and slowly opened it. The reservoir released with a low groan. Water surged through the old concrete channel, rushing toward the land like it had been waiting for permission to come home. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was restoration. News outlets tried to spin the story. Some called it a local zoning scandal. Others, a David versus Goliath tale of rural justice. But none of them captured what it really was. This wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about a single man standing up to a corrupt board. It was about systems failing quietly until someone says no. I never asked for attention. I asked for accountability. And once I got it, I didn't celebrate. I went back to work. I donated part of the settlement to an environmental law nonprofit. Another portion went toward rebuilding the local community center, without HOA oversight. And the rest? I invested in preserving this land. I redrew my boundary lines, not to expand, but to make them undeniable. I paid for a second survey team to triple-check every coordinate. Then I had permanent boundary markers installed, steel rods 6 feet deep, laser-etched with the case number. Let them try to steal it again. I still get emails from strangers who saw the case summary online. One man wrote, "My HOA tried to fine me $10,000 for growing tomatoes. You gave me the courage to fight back." Another woman said, "I lost my dad's house to a forged lien. You showed me how to hold people accountable. They all end the same way. Thank you. But I didn't do this for applause. I did it because I had no choice." Michael and I still talk. He keeps a photo of the courtroom verdict in his office, gavel frozen midair, my case number stamped on the caption. Best line I've ever heard a judge say, he tells people. Keep your receipts. He wasn't wrong. Documentation didn't just win the case. It proved the truth when no one wanted to believe it. That's what built the legacy. Some nights, I sit on my porch and listen to the water rushing down the channel I once designed. The wind moves through the pines. The land is quiet again. I don't think about Hale anymore. I don't wonder where he is or what he's doing. The legal records speak louder than any apology ever could. 35 homes. Forged maps. A fake deed. And a dam they forgot I still controlled. People assume justice comes with a bang. But sometimes, it's the sound of boots on gravel, a steady voice in court, and water returning to its rightful path. I look around this place now, unchanged in all the right ways. No signs. No citations. No board meetings trying to rewrite reality. Just land. Just peace. Just truth. So here's my final word. I thought the verdict would close the door on everything. I believe the demolition of those 35 homes marked the final chapter. But justice, I learned, doesn't end when the gavel drops. It ripples. Quietly. Deeply. And not always in predictable directions. A month after the ruling, I woke to a knock at my door, gentle, careful, as if the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. When I opened it, a man in his late 60s stood on the porch. His hands were clasped, knuckles pale from the cold. "You Daniel Carter?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once. "I'm Alan Shaw. Former county assessor." The title hit me like a cold drop of rain. He stepped back slightly. "I need to talk to you. Not as an official. Just as a man who should have spoken up years ago." I let him inside. His boots left small puddles of melted frost on the hardwood. He scanned the room, then focused on the folders spread across my kitchen table, the evidence I still hadn't stored away. He exhaled. "I saw the trial. I saw everything. And I have something you should know." He reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. Thick. Heavy. Handwritten label. "For you," he said. I opened it carefully. Inside were photocopies of documents, old ones, older than anything we'd found during discovery. Yellowed pages. Faded ink. Hand-signed property ledgers from the early 1990s. "These are original land allocation notes," Shaw said. "Before the county digitized records. Your family's parcel boundaries were updated only once, after a flood, never rezoned, never transferred." I flipped through the pages. My grandfather's signature appeared on 3. Crisp loops. Confident strokes. Signatures I recognized from childhood. Shaw looked at me, shame written across his face. "I should have reported the discrepancies the moment I saw them," he said. "But people above me insisted that Canyon Ridge was a priority project. I convinced myself it wasn't my fight. Now I see what that cost you." His voice cracked. "Not from guilt alone, regret." I set the papers on the table. "Why come forward now?" He breathed slowly. "Because you fought back. And because I want to contribute to repairing what I helped others damage." I nodded. "Then you already have." He left quietly. But the weight of his visit lingered long after the door closed. That night, I spread the old documents beside the new ones. 2 eras of truth, finally aligned. The edges of the past touched the edges of the present. It was the first time the story felt whole. I turned on the camera and began recording again, not for court, not for evidence, just for the archive. "This land," I said, "was always meant to hold water, forest, and open ground. And somewhere along the way, people forgot what stewardship means." The words came out steadier than expected. I shut off the camera. 2 weeks later, the community approached me with a proposal. At the rebuilt town hall, chairs were arranged in a circle, no podiums, no raised platforms, no symbols of authority. Just neighbors, sitting as equals. A woman in her 50s stood. "We want to return something," she said. "Not because the court forced us, but because you reminded us what accountability looks like." She handed me a folded blueprint. Inside was a design for a nature reserve, walking trails, a repaired creek corridor, reforestation zones. "It's your land," she said. "But we'd like to help you restore it." I didn't speak at first. I didn't need to. I just nodded. The room let out a breath it had been holding. For the first time, they weren't looking at me as the man who sued them. They were looking at me as someone who kept them from losing their community to corruption. Restoration began in late summer. Volunteers arrived with gloves, shovels, and quiet determination. Kids hauled buckets of river rock. Parents planted saplings. Retirees removed old debris from the creek bed. No one talked about the lawsuit. No one mentioned hail. No one whispered about blame. They simply worked. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the trees, a teenager planting a spruce nearby said, "I never realized how much land actually matters." His comment stayed with me. Land isn't wealth. It isn't power. It's responsibility, and sometimes, the weight of that responsibility shifts entire communities. By early fall, the creek ran clear. The soil had deepened into rich layers of fertile earth. Dew clung to new branches. Wildlife returned, cautious curiosity giving way to natural patterns. I walked the boundary trail at dawn. Mist curled between the pines. Water gurgled softly over stone. It felt like the land was exhaling after years of pressure. Halfway down the path, I saw a motion-activated light flicker near the subdivision. Not a warning. A sensor tied to the reconstruction work. A young man in a safety vest stepped forward. "Morning, Mr. Carter," he said. "Morning." He pointed toward the open space beside the creek. "We're installing the last of the new markers today. Steel core. GPS tagged. No one's moving these again." I nodded. "Good." He hesitated. "I'm glad you fought them." "So am I said. "And I'm glad you didn't give up on us." That last part caught me off guard. I didn't respond immediately. I simply placed my hand on the new marker, a cold, solid reminder of what truth looks like when it's made permanent. A month later, I sat with Michael at a small cafe downtown. He stirred his coffee slowly. "Closure looks good on you," he said. I smiled. "Feels different than winning." He raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Winning ends a fight," I said. "Closure begins the future." He leaned back. "You know, cases like yours usually leave communities fractured. But somehow, you pulled them back together." "I didn't pull anyone," I said. "People choose truth when they're finally allowed to see it." He smirked. "You ever think about running for county office?" I laughed. "Not a chance." "Shame," he said. "People might actually trust you." Winter arrived early that year. The first snow fell in a slow, peaceful drift. The kind you barely notice until the world turns quiet. I stood on the dam at sunrise, watching flakes dissolve on the reservoir surface. The water shimmered under the pale light. My land was whole. My community healed. And the shadow of the HOA finally gone. I closed the valve slightly, allowing the winter flow to ease into its seasonal pace. Balance restored. The story could end here, and in many ways, it did. But like all good legacies, it didn't disappear. It settled into memory, into soil, into the quiet strength of a place rebuilt with truth at its center. And if there's one thing all of this taught me, justice doesn't echo in courtrooms. It echoes in the land that remembers who stood for it. Have you ever faced a corrupt HOA or a broken system? Tell me your story, and remember, keep your receipts.